Hello and welcome back to the Projector Stories podcast. I'm Sarah, a 1-3 emotional projector.
I'm Lora, a 5-1 splenic projector.
And in this podcast, we riff on what's been going on with us within our human design deconditioning journey and beyond. We both have the 1156 channel of storytelling, an open identity center, and right minds, so we never really know what's going to get pulled out of our brains. But if we are correct for you, it should be fun to listen along. Hey, Laura.
Hello, Sarah.
So we haven't been on in a little bit. It's been a couple weeks, and there has been a multitude of things that have come up naturally. But just to give a little background, at least for me, I was telling Laura the Mars conjunction in conjunction with Uranus in I believe it was Taurus was
Yes.
like a real hardship on my body physically. I had like 3 days of some of the worst symptoms that I've had since starting my detox. And it was on top of that, like part of healing, as I'm realizing, is that like as you're healing, you're also dealing with like a lot of emotional stuff kind of like bubbling up to the top of whatever else you're feeling physically. And so it doesn't put me in a state of like having the adrenal capacity to like want to really have any kind of conversation that's long form, because I just feel really like overly sensitive. And I don't think there's a such thing necessarily as like overly sensitive in a bad way. But for me to be able to like see clearly, especially as an emotional person, when I'm in pain physically, when I'm emotionally confronted, it's hard for me to want to like have conversations with people where I'm being recorded. You know what I mean? So I took a little break. I told Laura about it since our last, and we are, at least as far as I'm concerned, still planning on doing series on the centers as like the energy allows and as things come up for us. But there was just a lot to talk about generally, and I just wanted to kind of like shit talk with Laura about what's been going on. So we're back to our old format. All of that being said, Laura, I know there has been, but has there been anything specifically that's been coming up for you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of the things that, you want to kind of jump us off with?
It's funny. It's like, oh, I remember that question. You used to ask that question on our previous episodes. Yes, but like first to respond a little bit to your intro here, it's not just like well, you said like you don't want to show up on recording when you're not feeling well. It's like, I don't want to talk to anyone ever when I'm not feeling good. So it's regardless if it's being recorded or not, just like leave me the heck alone, please. And random tangent that's coming up, it's like sometimes like when you're put in a penta and you have familial conditioning obligations, you can't always avoid that. Like, yeah, your family members say like, oh, so and so is coming over for dinner or for this occasion or for that occasion, and you just like kind of have to show up, which I don't know, it makes me think of spontaneity with like what people used to do when like we didn't have cell phones. Sometimes you'd call someone ahead of time, but sometimes you just show up to their door and be like, ding dong, hey, like, want to have some coffee? And like they welcome you in. And that aspect of culture has been lost. People don't do that as much anymore, at least like not in my personal life. And like the only person that does that now on occasion is my sister. But usually she asks us if we're home ahead of time. But like sometimes she does show up unannounced. And oh, how long has it been since we talked? We talked about solicitors
It's been at least
several weeks
2 weeks.
ago.
Yeah.
And so just sorry, complete tangent, but just like thinking of that, even though like soliciting bothers the bejesus out of me, And like my mother too, especially like the people that hang out and loiter in front of grocery stores. Like, I just want a grocery shop. I don't want to talk to you. Leave me alone. But for my mother, it was correct when that guy came by and said, like, hey, do you need construction work done? And mom's like, uh-huh, I do actually need construction work done. And then it got done. And it was a very generator thing that happened for her to respond, to not initiate. And it was kind of smooth. On the other hand, my dad, he also was solicited. People came by the front door asking if we want solar panels. And I guess he was considering it. And so somehow, like, they scheduled an appointment, and like this guy came over, and it was one of those days where I wasn't feeling my best and I did not want to talk to anyone, and I wanted to be home alone in the comfort of my own home where I can go walk in my pajamas like a goblin and eat whatever I wanted out of the fridge without caring about anything. But no, this guy came over, and he was over for 4 hours. 4 hours. And I was just stuck in my bedroom feeling like poop, not able to go get NSAIDs out of the kitchen medicine cabinet. And it was torture. And like, obviously, I could have just gone over there in my goblin state and taken the medicine and left. But my undefined emotional center did not want to do that. It wanted to avoid confrontation of any sort. And so I stayed and complained to Sarah about how terrible I felt and how annoying this guy was. But like, when I talked to my parents about it, they were like, he would not leave. There were times where like they would stand up and be like, okay, we'll contact you or you'll contact us. Like, we'll talk about this at some other point in time. Like, let's finish the conversation. And he would comfortably like remain in his chair and not get up and just perpetuate it and not leave. And like, my goodness, how rude. Like, what is wrong with that man? Anyways, yeah, so I forgot why my mind wanted to like go down to that tangent, because I was talking about like the spontaneity of people showing up to your door uninvited, but it's welcome. And so it just makes me think of like how we respond to that with our own different definitions. Like, if your authority says no, like, you cannot come in right now. Like, I don't want to engage with you right now. People don't do that. Like, we would welcome them in regardless if we didn't want to deal with someone's presence at our door. Whether if it was like someone we usually typically like, a friend or something. So yeah, it just made me think about that sort of behavior that we used to have much more in the 80s and 90s, and how we don't really do it anymore. And like, people are just more of homebodies, at least in like my own reality, that like people don't interact with each other and you don't talk to your friends for months, and it's a-okay. And I don't know if that's just like a age thing or cultural thing with different generations. Like, it's my parents' generations that would go visit with their friends more, whereas it's like my generation that's more homebody-ish. I don't know. Anyways, that's just the random thoughts that come to my head in the here and now, as it pertains to the correctness of authorities and how sometimes your authority might say, no, I don't want to interact with you. And yet society conditions us to be polite. And so we continue interacting with said person.
Yeah, I remember you telling me all about that, and I was just like, girl, my hunger would have just been like so rude and just walked right by everybody and grabbed the potato chips. Not that I'm eating them right now, but because of my detox. But I do know the feeling pretty well of wanting to also avoid, and it's interesting because I think for different people, like, the avoidance comes from different, like you're saying, different people, the avoidance comes from different places. Like, for me, it's I don't want my adrenals to be stimulated by someone. I don't want to have that kind of adrenalized experience, because of having to like interact with somebody. Regardless if I think the experience is going to be good or not, there's always, my nervous system reacts a certain way to people, and that in part could be due to trauma, but like my particular response to other humans, like, there's a good amount of anxiety that I feel physically, and I don't want to have to deal with the essentially the adrenaline or the cortisol that those types of interactions bring me when I'm dealing with somebody that I don't know from Adam. like somebody who's just brand new, never seen before, having to like make nice. And I guess that means I'm not a people person. Um, Hard for me to really, I had this realization these past few days. I'm like, I'm left. My body is left. I have a left brain and I have a left body, and so there's a lot of movement that I do. And I love dogs, and I've just been wanting to get out of the house. So I've been, I signed up to an app called Rover for dog walking, just because it's like I get to hang out with dogs and walk them and like get out of the house if I feel like it. And it was like I realized like I used to be a waitress, and I used to love waitressing because I loved how much activity my body was going through. Like I loved being able to do things with my body that was like expending energy that would allow me to, get stuff done and like, do it really quickly and talk to people and have conversations and memorize orders and all this stuff simultaneously because it had become so habitual to me. But like this was like before I really came into contact with like the truth of my body, which is that it feels deeply uncomfortable around people. Um and so I miss that feeling of like doing things that are almost mindless because they've become so habitual, that are like useful, doing useful, mindless, habitual things, very left body, right mind, kind of jazz. But, so point being that like I realize I don't want to deal with people. Like I don't want to go back to moving my body in a way that is like around a lot of people. Even at a library, I don't want to be a librarian. Like I want to be active and useful and feel like I'm doing habitual things that are useful, basically, but not in a way that has to put me in contact with a lot of people. So I was like, this is like the perfect way for me to like allow my left body to like move throughout its environment, without having to interact with humans, which very tangential to what you said. But yeah, it gives like it gives, another perspective of the avoiding people tendency that we seem to have. And I also wonder if it's not just also a projector thing because of like how much our energy gets pulled into that person, like just the level to which that we are getting our.
It did. No, I still see 1221, 1222. I don't know, like there's a little sign in the corner that makes it seem like it's still being recorded.
I know, but there was a error message that came up across my page.
Oh,
So it wasn't maybe on, it was probably still recording, but like something happened. Um, yeah, something happened. It seems like it's recording now. It is. This makes me wonder if we should hop on to Zoom.
maybe. Also, I found out that my sister's coming, so
Oh no, what time?
I I don't know. My mom's going to the dentist. She said Anna might be coming soon. I don't know, probably not soon. I can text her and see what time she's coming.
Text her. Text her.
Um,
Okay, sorry everyone. We had a little technical difficulty. I think we're in the pre-retrograde, Mercury retrograde shadow, so I'm just gonna blame that, even though I don't actually believe in blaming that, but that's neither here nor there. Laura, I feel like I had just finished talking about my experience of like just social anxiety generally and
yeah.
kind of the way that it shows up. I feel like you were about to say something. Is that Was that correct?
Well, probably, but do I remember what I was about to say? Probably not. Well, just first off on Mercury retrograde, Ra has even talked about it in terms of like technology malfunctioning because everything has crystals. It's not just humans that have personality crystals. Everything has a crystal of consciousness. But it just doesn't have the self-reflected awareness of that consciousness, which segues me into probably I think what I wanted to say, which is it's interesting, like the quality of being antisocial. Um, because I too used to be a people person. I think deep down I still am, but my mind, probably my not self mind, my deconditioning mind, I don't know what you want to call it, but like that is antisocial. But it's not so much that I need that like hustle and bustle busyness. Like I was not good at restaurant life, even though that's like what I went. I didn't go to college to study restaurants, but like I did my degree was in hospitality administration because it's like the ultimate people person type of job of like working in hospitality where you're constantly intermingling with other human beings. Um, I not that I wanted to do that. I wanted to have a bakery, but that's besides the point. Anyways, um, I used to be much better at socializing. And I guess as I've aged, I've become more self-aware of how awkward I am. And that hinders me from feeling comfortable, like being a people person. Yeah, it's not so much that my body needs like you were kind of describing it as like productive energy for your body to be in that flow state, sort of. I think that's what you were trying to say. My body doesn't crave that, but it craves the social interaction, which I think the segue is like it's interesting because like we're here for awareness, um, for mind to mind awareness, for ajna to ajna awareness. Like that's like what the nine-centered being is all about. The seven-centered being was about survival. And we're not here to survive. We're here to share our experience, our human experience with the other, to share our outer authority. And that means interacting with people. So it's interesting to be I guess as we're calling it antisocial, which we were talking offline about line twos. I feel like those are the most antisocial, again with like sixes on the roof as well, but like twos are very in their own bubble. They're the most leave me alone type of antisocial type of person that are the least inclined to interact, which makes it awkward to be a 2-4 because your mind's like, don't interact with me, and your body is like, hey, let's be friends.
Mm-hmm.
So it's such a conundrum. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, interesting to think about how we can identify or feel the need to be antisocial or to not interact with humans when we're here to, as we're talking to you, dear listener, as we're interacting with you, we're here for sharing our awareness. So yeah, it's interesting to think about in that kind of full circle way.
Yeah, and I feel like that was perfect. I didn't even know I wanted to talk about this, but I'm glad that you that's where you went because especially with the line twos and the line fours and things like that, I have been following a detox specialist who's been detoxing people for like 50 years. And his office is actually an hour away from me. And after doing the kind of digging that only Pluto rising projector does, I found out that he's a projector and that he's a mental projector on top of that. And he has an naturally has an undefined G center. And the reason that I'm saying all of this is because I realized with him, I was thinking, I'm watching him. He doesn't know he's a projector, right? And yet, but he's a 3-5, and so his life has been about a lot of trial and error, bumping into things, trying things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and kind of having to deal with a lot of people in the process of being a healer in a sense. And it was very clear to me that like this dude, I met him in the flesh, and he's 75, his skin is wrinkled, but he has got the energy of like a 30-year-old dude, maybe
You
young.
did meet him in the flesh.
I met him in the flesh this week, Laura.
Oh, how exciting.
I know it was so cool because I was going there and I was having the consultation with one of the women that do the detoxification consults, and I didn't know if I was actually going to see him, but I was sitting out in the waiting room and I hear his voice because I've gotten so accustomed to like listening to him. I was like getting nervous, you know. And he comes out and he sits right next to me like we're old pals and he just starts talking to me and I'm like looking directly at him like and thinking about, I was just talking to him, like just in the moment, explaining to him like my situation, telling him, oh my God, I watched so many of your videos, like, and telling him like what I've learned about what's going on with me, telling him that I've been detoxing for the past 6 weeks. It was just a really cool experience. And like he's given me faith in like the urge and the impulse to individuate, without even needing to know about human design because there's like a youthfulness to this person. Like I felt like I could see his personality consciousness. Like I couldn't see it, but I could sense it. And his body had not begun the calcification process because he's still like I guess you could say evolving like in his consciousness and in his body. And so there's this like youthfulness that almost is disarming in somebody that's that age because you're so used to them kind of being brittle and feeble because of what typically happens to people when they, are calcifying in mind, body, and spirit physically. It's like their passenger kind of just goes numb and is not really there anymore. Like it's still there, but it's like, it's not online. And I felt that. And the other thing that I felt, and this is what's going to tie it all together, is that he does not have a defined G center, like I was saying before, but he has a consistent way of showing up, like as his human body, right? And I think one of the things that in this limbo area that we're in, as we're trying to, in a sense, mentally figure out how to be in integrity with ourselves while we are around other people. I think this is one of the biggest stumbling blocks of like specifically my social anxiety right now of like how do I stay in integrity? It's like what would Sarah do in this situation if Sarah's in integrity with herself? And that's a question that I keep asking myself over and over and over and over and over again because my conditioning in my past has made me do things that were out of alignment with my own authority. So they are necessary questions. You could argue that, you can't solve them in the mind of, you can't use the mind to get out of the mind, but, as you're deconditioning, the mind kind of has to eat itself like a snake eating its own tail. Like that's kind of what we're looking for to happen as opposed to just like absolving ourselves of it or just being able to completely leave it behind because if we're not thinking about what it is that we're doing critically, then we're just going to fall into doing the conditioned thing, which typically is in favor of what culture deems as appropriate behavior and not what our authority does. And so there has to be some level of tension that's created when you're deconditioning because you're putting your body into tension with what it's used to doing. And you're looking for that kind of higher authority to give you the more readily available response to whatever the thing is that you're doing. And so like for me when I was talking to him, he kind of like solved like a problem for me without realizing that he did that because again, part of the social anxiety thing that I'm experiencing is that I want to stay in integrity with myself. And how do I do that when I'm around people who I feel like are not necessarily in integrity with themselves? Because so much of me, the cross of Eden, is like a truth speaker and like wanting to talk. The 11-12 is such a communicative set of gates and transmit information. And so, being able to speak and figuring out ways to be in integrity with myself while also knowing what my audience is. It's something that I've had to think a lot about in order to not step on people's toes when they're not ready. Me and Laura kind of talked about this a little bit offline of like, kind of like instead of being like, this is the truth, it's like, is this person ready for the truth? And if they're not ready, then why say it to them? If I'm not being recognized. And that's not to say that like, oh, this is a whole other tangent actually, but that's not to say that like you have to be fully recognized to be correct, because somebody who's conditioned is going to have a hard time fully recognizing you. But there are instances where you're like planting a seed, you're like planting a seed because somebody recognizes you in a moment and you say something that maybe they're not fully ready to absorb at all at once, but like it will kind of slowly mature or slowly saturate into them over time. But yeah, the point is that the kind of answer that he gave me was like, oh, he's got this, he's kind of allowed his body to do what his body does. He's got like a little bit of a southern, like Midwestern drawl. And he has a certain way of saying things to people. He always calls people sweetheart. He's always saying, hello, my dear ones, when he starts his video. He has this like extreme compassion, but he has a consistency to him, and he also isn't allowing himself to get out of his own integrity. And I'm like watching this as someone who has, again, an undefined G, me having an undefined G and him having an undefined G, and like, oh, okay, like the body takes over and does it. There is a consistency that comes out of the body, even if the personality may not be holding tightly to specific behavioral models of what it thinks it is. Like the body, I have a Jersey accent. I curse more than other people. Like there are things that are consistent about me because this is where my body was raised. This is the conditioning that my body faced on like the verbal level. And so there are these like consistencies in the way that we can express ourselves around people that make it so it's so not so much of a hard thing to think about. And like, he's a 3-5, and just to say, like, I'm a 1-3, and Ra has said on multiple occasions that for 1-3s, it's hard. Relationships can be tricky because we are trying to understand them as we are living them. I wonder if the 5-1 has that too in a different way, because y'all are paranoid while you are trying to like foundationally like feel like a kind of foundationally sturdy within yourselves because of the extreme projection field that you have to deal with. But yeah, I mean, just to speak on, I guess, like the anxieties around figuring out while you're deconditioning how to actually be correct as yourself without having to stress out about it and without having to feel uncomfortable around people, like, just allowing yourself to be what it is that you are without like the what it feels like with him. And again, the man has definitely, as a third line personality, he has conflicted with so many people. You can tell in his life that it has softened him around conflict, that he just doesn't take it seriously anymore, because of the kind of extremity of his belief system. So it's not like there was no conflict for him to kind of get to where he is, but wherever he goes, he brings his own truth, his own authority, his own integrity. And I thought there was something there that was just really fucking cool to see, of like a projector living their truth in real time and like being really successful and like doing what they love. So, Laura, I just talked for a long time. Sorry. If there's anything you want to add or just reflect on from what I said.
I feel like I have tangents that are like little tentacles that might take off into different
Yeah.
directions. So like you're not true to the center of what you were saying, but they're tentacles. The first of which is like mental projectors. And you talked about his youthfulness. I've noticed that in other mental projectors as well, that they're to me, they're not like typical projectors. They're their own type. But when you look at all the different types, there's so many different types of projectors that it's like hard. I mean, we have like that center body of the octopus. That's true. That the way of our aura works, it penetrates into the other, and yet energetically, there's so many different differences between us. I mean, like same with generators too. Um, and same with reflectors. I feel like it can be said for any type, but um when I just think about all the mental projectors I know and I've interacted with, they're all very youthful and very energetic, and very active, which I think is wild because like I'm well, I don't have any motors, but like other projectors, we're exhausted all the time and we're always energetically depleted. And yet, you see them without any definition below the throat, and they're somehow full of energy and vitality and innocence and youthfulness and all this stuff. And it's just like, I don't understand. But um, yeah, I've noticed that sort of trailing quality that they all have in common, which maybe it's him, maybe it's a mental projector thing, maybe that's just my own weird experience with a handful of mental projectors I know, and it's not the truth for all of them. Maybe there are some really tired, fatigued, exhausted mental projectors out there that don't fit the description of being youthful and full of energy. So I won't hold all mental projectors to that standard. Um, but that's one little tentacle. Another little tentacle is thinking about 12.3, because again, you brought up Cross of Eden, but it's not just Cross of Eden, it's 12.3 specifically as part of that cross, which like I have Mars and detriment on my design setting 12.3. Sarah has it as her, is it your sun or your earth? Your earth, design Earth in 12.3? I don't know, one of the two,
Yeah,
part
it's
of her
my
cross.
designer.
And we talk about it a lot, very lovingly, as the gate in line of self-loathing. And we tend to generalize it a lot on our own as like, oh, hate yourself, oh, find all the faults in you. Just like self-reflecting of like, oh, how disgusted we are with ourselves, which is true. And yet at the core of 12.3, when we're looking at it from a logical analytical standpoint, it is individual circuitry that is social. It's part of the channel of openness. It is the throat energy, so vocalizing energy of wanting to express one's individuated mutation to the other. It's where individual meets the other, like where it surpasses just being part of the individual experience. Individual circuitry, like, yeah, it's here for yourself to be empowered, but I guess all of individual circuitry, all the gates are there. And like when you empower yourself, you can mutate the other and empower the other. But 12 is like where that vocalization deliberately comes across. You're sharing your experience with someone, you're sharing your individuation with someone. Um, and part of it being a funky little energy is that it is the third line, which means it's going to bump into things. And ideally, it's a gate of caution. But because it's the third line, it doesn't understand caution because it just wants to bump into things. It wants to, there's an analogy Raha said about like the third line being the staircase from the first floor of a house to the second floor. And as you're walking up the stairs, you're too tall, and so you're bumping your roof on the rafters. It wants to get to the second floor. It wants to get out of the lower trigram and up into the upper trigram where it can see the other, talk to the other, express that outer authority. But to do so, it's going to bump its head. And with 12.3, in that experience of bumping one's head, it's not upholding caution, but like oversharing when it's not appropriate, or like not understanding when caution is needed, therefore resulting in previously said awkward experiences of like, I didn't know how awkward it actually was. And now that I'm older and more self-reflective, I can see that gate and expression of like when I say things I shouldn't, when I should be cautious and I'm not. And so I can see it, Sarah, in what you're saying now about like having anxiety of wanting to share your individuation with the other, wanting to do that, but that gate and line in particular being a facet of how that is going to actually materialize for you
Yeah.
through the uncomfortableness. But it's like Sarah doesn't have it just in detriment like me. She can, be exalted as well. Which I forget what the particular line of Neptune exalted in 12.3 is. But it's not self-loathing. It's not the negative side of that. Um, so yeah, it makes me think about that side of things. Um, Sorry, my dog just knocked on my door, which
Knock,
I feel
knock,
like,
knock.
well, my just fun side tangent just for conversational sake and just to tell you, Sarah, we have our dog Marcella and my sister has a dog named Lora and my sister she traveled in March and we took in her dog while she traveled and then we kind of kept her dog for her because her dog was happier with us than it was with her. And we tried giving her dog back to her a couple weeks ago and like she took her dog back. I don't know if it was for 2 or 3 weeks, but her dog, she recently moved to a new home and her dog is, I mean, like it's not that she's not happy in her new home, but her new home is like where the dog wants to go outside to like relax and be cool is a very dirty area. It's like slate, flagstone. I don't know what type of stone it is. It's not grass. We have grass. She doesn't have grass. And so the dog is getting really dirty over there. And we felt really bad for her. And my sister has a new son who doesn't know how to interact with dogs yet because he's like a year old. And so the dog is jealous of him. Anyways, we took her back. Lyra, we took the dog back. We're like, nope, you're gonna live with us for the foreseeable future. And that dog is one that gets very expressive when she's hungry, and it's getting close to her lunchtime, so she's probably gonna be interrupting a lot for the rest of this episode. But yeah, Sarah, we took Lyra back. Just wanted to tell you. We tried to get rid of her, but just like the cat came back the very next day. Well, that's a depressing song, but yeah, Lyra came back with us. So that's just tidbit of a story time.
Okay, love that for her. Glad she's back, although we're just going to tell her to kindly pipe down. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think I love that you said that. This is why you guys, it's so fun talking to Laura because it's something that I didn't think about of just the quality of that 12.3, not just necessarily being about the self-loathing, which is like where I think about it so much because everyone's always like, it's the epitome of self-hatred. I'm like, okay, like enough, 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 because it's like there's a deeper quality that's going on there that like we need to kind of turn over in our hands, like Laura was explaining. And even if your Mars is in fixed in a sense in the detriment, like the reason that it happens is actually like the thing to look at, I feel like with that line, because it's the push, the desire to want to share with people that perhaps will not, and almost certainly will not be ready to hear you, and maybe that's correct. Not in every instance. Of course, there's plenty of times where we stick our projector pointy, noses where they just don't belong. But I think that and then feeling the sting of that, of the not readiness, it's a different than bitterness, right? The self-loathing of being like, damn it, I shouldn't have said that, even if maybe it's correct for you to have said that, or like this person, it's yeah, it's different than bitterness, I would say. And so it's an interesting tangent or tentacle or whatever to go down. The Neptune, I believe, is just the like ability to cleanse vanities from oneself because of these experiences. It's like I'm like, oh God. Because vanity is another word that comes up and around this key. And I used to think that the 12th gate, like the vanity was like more of a visual thing, but really it comes from like the mental vanity of y'all, like I know that I'm right about this thing, and like why can't you understand that kind of vanity? And the part of it that I feel like is cleansing, if there is any cleansing of it for me, is when I know that I'm right. I know that I can see a higher perspective, and I know better than to try and speak it to anyone. because it's a vanity of mine to think that what I know is anyone else's business than my own, right? And so maybe that's a personal way that I take that. I can't speak to how Laura, I guess, identifies the 12.3 in her own life, but that is, yeah, a really interesting just like way to look at it, because that's the thing, and it's like so fundamental if you're looking at it from the gene keys perspective, which we really don't, but for this purposes, it's like at the very bottom of the chart, like it's at the what is it, 6 o'clock of the gene keys chart. And so it's a very like I see um perspective of like the deepest parts of who you are for the design earth. And I feel like fundamentally I'm always challenged with this feeling of how do I say what I know to people, and when is it worth saying, and how do I do it without my adrenals taking a hit, without unnecessarily hurting myself. And then it's also on the flip side, like how do I not avoid doing it when it is correct, because it doesn't always feel good. So yeah, thanks for pulling that into the frame. Was there any other tentacles?
Well, to bounce off this current tentacle, as I like to call them, they're not tangents anymore. They're tentacles for fun's sake. But for the how, it's emotional. Like if you think about the location of gate 12, it's reaching towards the solar plexus, gate 22. And gate 22 is like the mutative energy of whether it's there to hear the thing or not. And if you think about it too, it's a manifesting energy. It's there to make an impact. People with 1222 are here to make a social impact on the other emotionally in an empowering way of like what their experience was and getting it out into the other for the other to hear. And so if you think about the core of that gate, that it's there to make an impact, that it's there to be a manifesting energy is one, but then also like it's not going to be spontaneous because it's connected to the emotionality of it and has to wait out the wave. So just thinking about manifestors are people who have this channel and like manifesting capacity, people who are here to make an impact in this way, they have to wait out the wave. They can't just, spontaneously do it. However, if you do analyze the individual waves of the solar plexus, they kind of like plateau and stay even, and they have their up and down spikes. So it's not like this rush of like going high and low in a flow, for them to be able to see where the highs are swooping and the lows are drooping, because it's spiky, but like you still have to wait it out. You can't be spontaneous with it, though. It's just like that's when it's uncomfortable. It's like when you're spontaneously saying something when you shouldn't have, and you're like, and you reflect on it, you're like, I wish I didn't say that, or I shouldn't have said that. It's because we're being spontaneous in the moment. Um, and so like it just makes me think about tentacle on this tentacle, like manifestors in general. We think about manifestors and the impact that they're here to make, but not all manifestors are spontaneous manifestors. Like there are plenty of emotional manifestors out there. And so you think about telling them, if you're encountering a manifestor and you're telling them about human design, you say, like, you're here to do, you're a doer, you're here to initiate. Um, and you want to trust the body's initiating urges. However, like you might have an initiating urge and it's not correct to do it spontaneously the way that we usually think initiating works. Oh, the body has an urge to do something in the now, therefore it's going to do it in the now. But like, no, with emotional manifestors, the body has the urge to initiate something, but it has to wait out the wave in order for it to gain clarity about actually initiating. And so I feel like it kind of further not limits, but like differentiates so many types, because like we think of manifestors and manifesting generators, they're the ones that have the capacity to do. Everyone else has to wait. However, it's not true, because manifesting emotional manifestors also have to wait. It's just a different type of waiting. And it kind of further perpetuates the circle of like, we're not here to be acting from the mind. Like, no one's here to be acting from the mind. We're all not all of us, like splenic manifestors, maybe can act in the now, but like so many of us are here not to be spontaneous, to wait, to allow things to, resolve or develop or do this or that in the material world before we have the capacity, whether energetic or opportunistic, to do something about it, to like hop on the flow of energy and wait for that recognition or wait for the circle response, get the go ahead, the green light to like continue on with doing something. Anyways, it's just the train of thought where my brain took me. So sorry, that was just like extra tentacle. But I feel like I had previous tentacles from what you were saying before with your experience with going to the doctor's office or like that health practitioner's office, but I can't remember what they were now. So any hoodle.
That's
That's where I
okay.
leave you.
Yeah, no, I mean it's, and just it just made me think of it must be hard, like again with the 12.3 having that quality of like self-hatred that can come out. It must be hard being a 1222 manifest, 12.3, 1222 manifester because it
Yeah.
feels like a very thankless, it could potentially be a very thankless position to be in where you're like constantly impact people who like make it so like you don't like yourself. Even if it is correct. But yeah, I mean, it was the there was like multiple different, I guess you could say, transmissions that came out from like seeing this guy who's like, I guess, been a mental projector who's like gone his whole life, like gaining energy in a sense. That's what it feels like. It feels like he's gotten better with age. Like it feels as though he has um he's he's like filled up with the recognition that he has to such an extreme level that he's not afraid of having to get into conflict with people ideologically or about what's going on because he like knows that the people that he needs to help he's helping, and it doesn't feel like an egoic cause, like he's not using his willpower to get his message across. It's very much like just the natural outpouring of what it is to be correct. At least that's what I think. And like naturally there are probably things about him that are still operating from a conditioned perspective because he doesn't have the information to like point out exactly where conditioning might live. But it seems like an 80-20 kind of thing. Like we say all the time that you can't like avoid conditioning. It will always be there. And you have to, we're living in the Maya. Like part of being conditioned is us learning how to operate in the Maya, like with the tools that we have. And so it's not, the not self isn't a bad thing. It can give us a lot of insights, but I feel like the 80-20 rule of like 80% you're operating from yourself, like your authority, and there may be some conditioning in there because I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of all of it. The mind will always, even Ross said until he passed, that the mind will still like say things to him as he's, going throughout his day. It'll still try and kind of get you to do what's in alignment with what it wants you to do. And that's been the other like it's funny for me specifically because I go on these long tangents of human design where I'm like very, very cognizant of like my mental landscape. And then I go down other holes and I see how much my mind has to do with that. But I also see that like it's almost as if my mind was completely on top of and like fully engulfed in my consciousness. Like I couldn't separate them. And at this point, it's like I start to get some moments where I can like pull it back a little bit. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is what it's like to not operate, to not allow the mind and the stories that the mind tells you to be the primary driving force of like your behavior. Um, but it's just not an overnight thing. And I don't know where I'm going with this tangent, but it's been it's been an interesting week for sure as far as like my consciousness around that goes.
Well, I have a sort of similar experience.
Okay.
to share. So good tangent, good segue. Something I've been very much immersed in recently is gardening because it's summertime. So like I've disparaged our weather, our microclimate before that it's always foggy. Well, the fog's gone, so now it's hot, but it allows for plants to actually be able to grow. And so I'm very much in sacral throes of biting off more than I can chew energetically and like doing a bunch, which is another tangent, but I'll try to stick to this tangent first. And I reflect back on where I was a month ago, several weeks ago, before I like my energy took over and was able to garden a bunch. And I was mentally bitter because I wanted to be recognized. Like my personality felt like it was not being recognized for its intelligence, for what it has to bring. I felt like no one was allowing me to be a proper projector, that I wanted to be able to guide other people, and no one was giving me opportunities to do that. No one was recognizing me. And so I was very much in a mentally bitter state, thinking about that, thinking about who I see myself to be, and it was not fun. And now that I've been in the garden for quite some time, it has allowed my mind to shut up, which I'm no longer hyperfixated on the fact that I'm bitter, or that no one's recognizing me. And it's no longer a priority because my mind previously was wanting to initiate or feeling like it should be doing something, feeling like something's missing, that my life isn't what it's supposed to be because it wants to do this thing. It wants to follow the projector strategy of waiting for invitations and like saying yes to those invitations and guiding people. And it wasn't getting those opportunities. And now that I've just been in my sacral energy, which good or bad, I don't know. Like my personality sun is in gate 9, which is in the sacral center. So I get that a part of my purpose, my incarnation cross, is to be sacral, even though I have an undefined sacral, it's to be in like the energetic details of using one's energy. Um, and Oh, my dog just came into my room, so this might get even more fun. And so no, no, she's vocal, so she might talk. I don't know if the microphone's picking her up. And so basically, to try to summarize quickly, is that uh, my my mind hasn't been able to fixate on its bitterness. And so it's been a very nice reprieve, although energetically I'm feeling depleted and like my body is not necessarily super happy with everything that it's doing currently, even though the mind is happy that it's not fixated on bitterness. And that was like the other sort of mini tangent, um, is just like sacral energy and just having energy or not as a projector. Because Sarah, just you talked about this dude, for lack of a better male descriptor, who has energy even though he's a mental projector. And it makes me think about how debilitating it is to receive information from the human design community or a reading that says, oh, you're a non-energy being, you're not here to be energy full of energy. You're not here to be super productive. Like your body is more passive, your body's going to be more relaxed. And then we identify with and embody those characteristics, regardless of whether it is true or not. And so I'm just like sort of not fully immersed in the mental um, wormhole, rabbit hole, whatever you want to call it, of figuring this out. But it's like percolating in the back of my mind on the back burner of wondering like how much energy is actually correct for the average human to have, which I brought up before versus like a projector. Like, do we actually have less energy? Is that something that's like physically common for us? Or is it a label that we affixate ourselves to, affixate, whatever the word is, because we're told that we're not supposed to have energy. Anyways, but part of on that note is like I somehow decided to clean my bedroom, like clean out my closet, wash all of my clothes because some of my clothes have mold on them and I don't want mold toxicity. So I thought, like, like I have the energy to do this thing right now. Sure, why not? And so I threw out every single thing from my closet, and it has been like a tornado hit ever since. Like it's been more than a week of like living in a total pigsty because I haven't been able to finish this task that I initiated of cleaning out my closet and going through all my clothes, doing all the laundry and putting it back in and sorting out things that I don't want to keep anymore. And the energy was there in the initiating moment, right? The first sacral moment that I had, like, oh yeah, I can do this. This will just take one day. Totally fine. I'll manage. No, like I just keep wearing the same dirty clothes because like all the other clothes I have not yet sorted through and like steamed and pressed and done all that. So um yeah, the energy, I thought I had energy, but I didn't. And so, like, I could actually see in my experiment, oh, look, I initiated. Oh, look, I did not actually have the energy to complete the thing that I thought I could do. But maybe that's because of not self-initiating and not necessarily because of it actually, like, my body has the physical energy inside of it to do the thing. Um, Sorry, I'm very distracted right now because my doggy is here. Well, not my doggy, my sister's doggy is here and asking for lunch. But Sarah, I don't even know what I just said. Sarah, do you
No,
have any
actually,
thoughts?
like a lot of the stuff that you just said was really interesting and relevant, and like this is beautiful. I love when that happens. But um, the past 2 days, I've had that kind of same feeling, and of the fatigue of like doing so much, but like not being in your head about it. And the interesting thing, just to pull back to that guy that we've been talking about, the 75-year-old detox specialist, Dr. Morse, he called something, so it was so apt. Like he named this behavior that we tend to do being a mind rider. He's like, I used to be such a mind rider. And I've been thinking about that and thinking about that. I've been riding that thought so much because like that's the main problem that I have. That's the main problem that we all have is that we're sitting in our mind, like going up and down with its ups and downs and its thought processes and things like that, that we like spin ourselves outside of reality and then we're like caught in this kind of like uh fugue state where we can't actually access what's correct for us. And it's again when I was talking about that like separation where like my consciousness and my mind have were like engulfed with each other, and now there are moments, this is why meditation, and maybe meditation looks like gardening for some people, but like the practice of like disidentifying with the stories that are being told constantly and weaved in your mind is so important because your mind will always seek stimulation, and the stimulation itself is taking you away from like being correct in your body. And so like we live in a world, and I've been thinking about this too, of like, are we in a world that is careening towards a black hole and like we can't pull ourselves out of it? Like the black hole being the brain rot of technology and dopamine addiction and like just like staying in your mind all of the time of just instead of living your life, just like constantly swiping through things on your phone and like allowing that to be enough until you die. And we have so much access to so many dopaminergic practices that we could very reasonably live our entire lives not actually living our lives, um basically just like being farmed for attention, being harvested for our attention, and then that's it, and then gone. And like again, ostensibly it'd be easier for projectors. I don't know if I just used that word right. It's just what came out, but because we don't know when enough is enough, too. But Laura's question, I think a really important question of like, do we have energy? And of course, as an energy projector, which is what I am, I know that I have energy. But the distinction that I'm realizing that's there is I don't have consistent energy for the same things, to do the same things over and over and over and over again. Like I cannot be counted upon. I cannot count upon myself to wake up every day and go to a 9 to 5 and be okay with that without it wrecking me, like psychologically, physically, mentally, all of the ways. because I don't have energy like that. That's not the way that it works for me. But like Dr. Morse, who has energy but has been juggling things, has had multiple businesses as a third line personality fail and work and owned like natural health stores and all of this stuff. It's like there's a quality of like there needing to be a differentiation in the types of energy that we have, in the people that we come across, like dictating the ways that we're using our energy as opposed to like the line items that we have on a job description. So there's this quality of like, yeah, we have energy all of the time, but it can be the type of energy where we're expected to do the same thing for the rest of our lives because that's not the way our energy works. And of course, some people are going to have more energy and some people are going to have less energy. But as human beings, we come with something that needs to be exercised. Um, it's funny too, because with Ruby, my dog, the trainers always said that like it works her out more to do games with her mind than it does to like run around and like throw the ball with her. Like when is being trained, it takes more energy out of her because she has to work harder in her head, and that is energy that she's having to output. And so perhaps for some of us, like our energy is going into mental pursuits, and for projectors, specifically projectors who have mental definition like me and Lora, we need to be recognized for our mind. It's just, again, the fucking old age, everything we know, we can't be making decisions from our mind, but our mind is like something that is very important to our process of how we're going to be recognized and in what way. And that's where it becomes, a very like fine line, like the razor's edge of understanding how to hone this tool while not allowing it to spiral us into oblivion. And I think, just from meeting him and what Laura's saying too, like there is something of like you do need to follow impulses that feel correct to your soul, like projectorness be damned in a sense, because those may bring you closer to being able to be recognized for what you need to be recognized for what you need to use your energy for, whatever energy that you have based on transits or mental energy or whatever. So it's like, again, like we have to walk the edge here because we're honing our mind, and maybe just the honing of it in and of itself is enough to not use it for ourselves. So it's a lot. Like it's a lot of discernment that you can't fake, you know. But I don't know where I was gonna go after that. Laura, are you still with me?
Yeah, I'm listening, not necessarily have anything to respond to what you said, but yeah, I was
Yeah.
there with my ears.
Okay, good. You and Lyra both. But yeah, I mean, it's just, and that kind of also, I had this other realization too of this is a tentacle. Maybe at best, it might be another octopus altogether. Um,
Wait,
but
you have to remember that. That's the perfect title. This may be a tentacle, but it could be another octopus altogether. So I don't know what it was. We'll have to re-listen. But I like that.
but no, I mean, but it's well, just because I've been thinking about recognition and like generally speaking and like how recognition works. And I had um I live with people, and I am one of them studies human design, but they're the types of people that study human design, like Ra has talked about this, of like the people that come to human design and use it as a tool to kind of prop up their not for nothing, but like not self existence. And and it makes their life smoother, no question. Like even if you don't fully decondition as a projector, knowing that to wait for an invitation can create a lot less sharp edges in your life, even if you're not going the full Monty, you know. So there's no shame in that. But I had this realization of like, when people recognize me in a way that I like to be recognized, which by the way, maybe it's my mind, maybe it's my soul, whatever it is, like it's not really relevant. It's just, my own like desire of to be recognized. There's usually this quality that they have where I am like they can kind of see me in my truth. They can kind of see my value on like a very deep and fundamental level. And a lot of times, those are people who are pretty close to their own integrity. They may be hovering around it, they may be circling it, they may not be on top of it, but they're like close enough and they're thoughtful enough that it feels like, them seeing me is, I don't want to say a win, but it's a success. And I realize that, as projectors in a not self world, most of the people that we're going to come across are people who, because they are not self, are unable to see you beyond their belief structure, their reality that they're stuck inside of. And so, again, like, to kind of bring the 12.3 back in, you might say something that is so piercing that it, like a seed, gets through to them and it's planted, like I said before, saturated. They are, it comes into them somehow, it lands on them. But, you may never feel the success of the recognition because they aren't ready to receive it. They may be on your fractal. This is even more important. They are on your fractal, but they are not deconditioned enough to be able to see you, right? Their awareness is not there. And so I guess this is kind of like for me it was like just a moment of, oh shit, like I understand something that I didn't understand before, because I was like wanting, and I'm always wanting this, and this may be my trauma, but like wanting somebody to see me in a way where I actually feel seen, instead of them just valuing me for what feels like their own value system. Like they're valuing me within their own value system, not at me as like what I actually am. um, and I realized, like, as long as you're conditioned, that's as good as it's going to get with recognition. Like, that's as good as it's going to get. Like, they're going to see you and value you within their own belief system that you fit within somehow. They've made a way for you to fit in there. And you may say something that drops on them like a ton of bricks and changes their whole fucking life slowly, but you may not ever know about it, as a projector again. And so just like having that, and like I said before, they're on your fractal. These people are meant to meet you and you're meant to meet them, but they're not ready. They're not ready for you. That was a post that I posted a while. It's like, you're either ready for somebody or you're not, that's on your fractal. But it didn't, the subtlety of what that actually feels like, of like knowing that somebody's on your fractal, but knowing that they don't see you in a complete way, that's a certain kind of pain too, like seeing that they value you and in the best way that they have conscious awareness and access to, based on the belief structure that they are conditioned by. And so when you do have the moments of people recognizing you in a larger way, because we're all stuck inside of our belief systems, but some people can see you in a larger way, it's like a huge win, big, big, big win. But yeah, there's these kind of variances of success with projectorness, and it's certainly not based on the other person being completely deconditioned, but I think that there's more of a like pow 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 feeling in your chest, like excited feeling when it really lands on somebody can see you in a larger way. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that good, Laura?
Yeah. Can I respond?
Yeah.
Well, first off, I think my sister might be coming here soon, so we might have to wrap up quickly. But um, I feel like you're speaking to the choir, preaching to the choir in terms of fifth line. just mechanics of, the recognition that you get. It's very conditional based on like what that person needs. And like they don't ever actually really see you because they cannot, because they can only ever see their projection upon who that fifth line is and what that fifth line can offer them in terms of value of like what that person needs in the moment. So, oh, woe is us for I feel like if you posted that in the fifth line of like the 5-1 projector group, like it's been said many, many times, and you wouldn't be the first. Because I feel like that's what a lot of us experience in there. But
Yeah.
something else that I feel like for the most part, like if we're in the Maya of like the common soup, alphabet soup of the world, that is like what you're gonna get with how you described it of just like a average moment of recognition that doesn't actually like feel amazing because that person isn't actually seeing you. You're offering that person a bit of guidance and like sure there is mechanical success, but it's not like magical miracle like oh my goodness this feels like I am fulfilled as a human being on this planet as it sometimes does like when it's superb and correct and like fractal times a million like those few and far between moments, like they do exist. They're just harder, not harder to come by, just more infrequent to come by. But like again, like common alphabet soup world is like, you're gonna get your average Joe type of success moment, where you're not actually seen. And yet thinking about it on the end of being the projector, like that is what we're craving. We are craving, deeply, deeply craving that sense of being seen and being properly recognized for whatever it is that we want to be seen and recognized for, which again, like you said, maybe it's your soul, maybe it's a personality. Like I've been there too, like where I'm recognized and mechanically successful for things that are correct and it doesn't feel like magic because it's not what my personality or my mind thinks would be great or would feel better or just like the things that I as again whether that I is the soul or the I is a personality or I is the ego or I is the not self mind what the I wants to be recognized for and so again, this is like where we're not here to be the I or to identify with the I. We are the awareness that is there lurking behind the I that can see the I for what it is, not like the I see the I, but like the letter I see the identity for what it is in wanting that recognition and what it looks like when it's successful or not, or when it's bitter or not. But we're again the like nine-centered purpose of a human being is to be the awareness behind, like Oz behind the screen, not actually what is happening in the soup of the world. But yeah, like a very good point of just like it sucks sometimes when you realize how infrequent the magic actually happens compared to what we could put on an idealized piece of paper of a generator is experiencing their strategy and authority of like how easy or perceptively easy it is for them to feel the magic of using their authority and strategy correctly, of feeling satisfied. Again, like maybe something that they're doing is menially satisfying. And sometimes something might be so satisfying that it just like puts their soul at ease. And I'm sure they're going to experience both. And it's not going to be just one or just the other, but it's probably going to be menial satisfaction, like, oh, clean the bathroom. Like that was satisfying because the bathroom's clean. But like, is that what their soul really wanted to do that day? Probably not. And yet, sure, like maybe there was satisfaction that occurred from them cleaning the bathroom. I'm sure like it exists for all of us. Which then begs the question of just like how magical is the world actually supposed to be and how menial is it actually supposed to be and like what does it even mean to be a human being in the mush of the world? Are we here to be menial, mundane muggles or are we here to be magical? I don't know what other words, but just experiencing more of the magic. Um, but I can hear my sister coming through the door. So this is the end for me at least.
Okay, I guess I'll wrap up and you can hop off if you need to. I just wanted to say one other thing about what you just said.
Well, I want
Um,
to hear it, so
okay,
I'll
okay,
ignore her.
it'll be quick. No,
She's lived here before. She knows where the things
she
are.
knows, but yeah, she knows how to make herself at home. Um, yeah, I mean, it's love that. Love what you just said. And it made me think like of the menial versus the like magic and the 80/20 thing that I was talking about before. Like I think that there is no menial tasks. I think that there's drops in the bucket towards success, satisfaction, surprise, and peace being the underlying theme of your life. And so the greater kind of prevalence of those themes, like that's the sign that you're getting closer to like living in integrity with who it is that you are. And the drop in the bucket can be from me walking into the chiropractor and like the guy at the front desk recognizing me for something and I feel success in that moment. Um, or it can be for a generator, like cleaning the bathroom, a drop in the bucket. But like, is the bucket like where's the marbles going? Like, are we getting more marbles in success or in bitterness? And the kind of I feel like it turns into a like snowball effect. Like that's what I felt like with Dr. Morse, because it seems like he came up against a lot of stuff in the beginning of his career. And like now it's just like utter recognition wherever he goes. It's just like constant like success and recognition. Like of course there's instances where he doesn't have it, but I think he probably had some level of recognition and success. He was like smelling his way towards it as he was getting there. But it wasn't like just handed to him on a silver platter because we all have to work around our conditioning. We all start out in a bitter state where like that has been the predominant marbles that we've been filling our buckets with. And so I think that there's the magic only exists in the mundane if the mundane is filled with the thing that is the correct signature for us. So that's what I was just when you were saying, is it more mundane? Like how much is menial? It's like everything is menial and it's okay if it's menial, if it's dropping in the bucket of success. Or if it's creating that as like the predominant vibration that you're experiencing. Um, and and so yeah, that I'll leave it there. But did you want to say anything before we close?
No, but I liked what you had to say, so thank you for saying it.
No problem. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for whoever came to listen. Really happy to have had this conversation. It's been too long, and you can catch us still on our Instagram at Projector Stories, on YouTube at the Projector Stories podcast, and on Facebook. And yeah, our YouTube has a video up now about the root. So if you want to check that out, go check that out. You'll see our faces. Okay.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening. Catch you on the flip side.
Bye.